Desiree. I'm here at Austinville Anglicans, and I want to offer a brief conversation starter on doubt. I have with me wonderful tech giant, Robin Hanna, and I'm going to invite you into a conversation on doubt and faith. And to begin that conversation, Robin and I will be speaking first and invite your own reflections as we talk. So, Robin, basically what I'm offering is that in the past, I may have been taught that faith is the opposite of doubt. And as I've grown up, my thinking has changed, and I'm suggesting now instead that faith is not the opposite of doubt, but doubt is the breeding ground for faith, and with more doubt comes more faith. And I'm not a mathematician, but I sort of picture it on an X and Y axis, so that as faith grows, so doubt grows. More faith, more doubt. And I picture sort of a diagonal, which for me represents wisdom. So as faith grows, doubt grows, and the intersection of that is wisdom. So I'm wanting for us to have a healing approach to doubt, because I feel like Christians use it as a way to beat themselves up. And when I notice Jesus, he seems to have a very graceful approach to doubt. And the example is Luke 24, where these two friends are walking away from Jerusalem, Jerusalem representing faith and so forth. And they're walking away, there's confusion and there's doubt, and Jesus shows up. And there's something so graceful about Jesus showing up in the midst of confusion and doubt. Whereas I think we may have been taught in the past, God only shows up where there's faith. So I'm just curious, what is your understanding or relationship with faith and doubt? How's that worked out for you?
When I was younger and going to university, even though I did engineering, I did have to study some humanities in that, which we quite resented. But one of the humanities I had to do was philosophy, and I was dead scared because I was a very fundamentalist, evangelical, Bible-believing person at that stage, and I was terrified of doing a philosophy unit because, to my mind, people studied philosophy to disprove God, and so I was really terrified going into it. Turned out to be one of the most amazing units I'd ever done, because it opened my mind to other ways of thinking, and I think that is certainly one event that comes to mind. We were talking about doubt and allowing doubt to be part of our lives. More recently, when I actually started studying counselling and working with people, I got quite excited about acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, and the difference there is it allows us to become comfortable with the feelings we normally are uncomfortable with. So a feeling like doubt or an emotion that's associated with doubt, we would be trained to allow that to take a place in our life, to actually sit in a spot. Some of my clients said, "Oh yes, I understand that, I'll put it in my backpack and it's in a place where it's comfortable." And I guess to me that was one of the latest areas where I've been able to deal with uncomfortable emotions, and doubt being one of them.
As you describe doubt in your training as a counselor, it reminds me of our spiritual prayer practice, the welcoming prayer, where we pray, I welcome everything that comes to me today, for I know it is for my healing. So in this space, we welcome doubt.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So I'm wanting a more healing relationship with doubt. So I'm suggesting that we invite doubt in as a welcome guest rather than slamming the door in its face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We develop, I use the word psychoses or whatever, we develop those when we try to resist things. If we've had a traumatic episode and we try to resist it, that's when the psychoses or the anxiety or whatever starts. But if we can practice just allowing that to be part of us, when I first started to get involved in this and started to think about how it would apply to my own life, one of the things I've always battled with is financial insecurity, and at that stage I had a large mortgage and so on. But I found that by taking that anxiety in and being able to sit with it and allow it to be there and to be comfortable with it and to even look at it, what shape it was, what colour it was, but allow it to be there in my life and make a friend with it, then I was able to avoid the downside and certainly enjoy the upside. And doubt, I believe, is very similar. We can take it in and we can use it and we can grow with it. Yeah.
So you mentioned using doubt, and you mentioned growing with doubt, and that brings me to the second point that I'm learning. So when I was a younger Christian, I kind of had the impression that faith was an event, and it was a recordable event that you may have noted in your diary. On this day I got faith.
When I was 9 years old, I became a Christian.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So with that kind of definition, there seems to be little place for doubt in one's life if it's this event. So if we're going to embrace doubt, and again, the reason I want to do this is because I feel quite empathetic with Christians who use doubt to beat themselves up and to instill guilt or something like that inside themselves, but doubt is embraced. So if we do that, then faith isn't so much an event as a process. So I'd like to just quickly outline a map of what that process could look like. So someone called James Fowler developed something that he called the stages of faith development. Now, it's really helpful because it enables us to see that faith is related to human development, and as we develop as humans, so our faith develops, and therefore so our doubt develops. I'm a bit nervous about maps because I don't want people to put themselves in a box and say this is who I am, because I don't think that's what a map is designed to be. If you have a map and you have, the Byron Bay Lighthouse, you can't sit on the map and go, I'm at the lighthouse. No, you're not. You're just on a map. It's not the real thing. So we mustn't confuse maps with reality. And I don't want us to use it as a kind of badge scenario. So in other words, I'm a stage 5 faith person and you're a stage 3 faith person. I don't think it's like that at all, because I think you have all of the stages all of the time at different moments in your life. But having said that, I'll just quickly outline it. And James Fowler uses stuff I think we've all studied. We're speaking to professional people, and whether you're a teacher or a nurse or even a parent, we would have learned human development theories like Piaget, who taught us that young children don't have object permanency, and that's why we played peekaboo with them. So, peekaboo, because as soon as you hide your face, the child literally thinks that you're not there. If he can't see you, you don't exist. And that's why babies scream their head off when the parents disappear, because if you can't see the parents, they don't exist. So it presents this existential crisis for, for the young child. But I no longer play peekaboo with my 16-year-old twins, because that's just silly, because as a 16-year-old, they've developed and they have what's called object permanency. Even if they don't see us, they know we exist. So using theories like that, he says there's stages of faith development. So there's roughly 5 stages. I do think there are better models, but this one just makes the point that faith grows. So stage 1 he calls intuitive faith, and it's the faith of a young child. And essentially, symbols are taken very literally, and they don't understand cause and effect. And this is quite important, I think, for Sunday school teachers, because it's often been the case that you teach them the story of Jesus walking on the water, and what does the 4-year-old do? He goes home and tries to walk on water.
I've tried that myself.
You've tried that yourself. I wasn't going to admit it, but I do confess to trying to walk on water in our pool that Sunday afternoon. And that's just simply the stage 1 faith, where things are taken very literally. Stage 2 is called mythic literal faith, and this is for the usually 8 years old to 12 years old, but some people stay in this stage forever. So it's a literal faith. There is concrete operational thinking, but there is still the fundamentalist literal approach to faith. And that's okay. You can have a deep faith at this stage, but a crisis will occur when your fundamental mythic literal approach is challenged by another body of knowledge.
By my philosophy unit.
Like your philosophy unit. That's the exact example. So the other example is when people discover that evolutionary theory is an actual thing, and that Adam and Eve is a beautiful parable telling us who we are made and why we are made, and to use the story of Adam and Eve to describe a scientific theory is like, I don't know, using the hymnal to fix your car. You can't use the one for the other. So if you're going to be a reasonable adult, usually you would take for granted that evolutionary theory is a thing. So this crisis is good.
I was under the understanding that God buried the fossils in the ground. No, that Satan buried the fossils in the ground to test our faith.
Oh, to test our faith. Okay, that would perhaps be a good example of trying to hold on to that stage of faith development.
Right, I believe that one.
Okay. So when that is challenged, you go into stage 3, and stage 3 often happens for adolescents. People tend not to see outside their box. They can recognize other belief systems, but they don't know that they're in a box themselves. And authority is quite an interesting thing at this stage. James Fowler calls stage 3 synthetic conventional faith. And the word conventional means that authority is placed in someone outside of yourself. So it's placed in the Bible, or it's placed in the church structures, for example, or it's placed in a tradition. So I think it was Ignatius who said, give me a child until he's 7 and I'll give you a Catholic for life.
For life, something like that, yes.
So that's holding someone in a conventional faith. Many people probably stay in this faith for their whole lives, and they're really good people. They're great to have in church, obviously. But if they grow beyond that, we enter a very tough phase, and stage 4 is something that he called individuative reflective faith. So you individuate, you separate from the collection, or you separate from the religious authority, and you become more reflective. So this often happens for people at university.
And that can be scary.
That can be exceptionally scary. So is there something more you'd like to say about that?
Well, you sometimes feel very lonely, and you definitely wonder whether you've lost it and whether you're on the road to hell.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what James Fowler would say. That's an expression of that stage 4 faith. So you have the ability to see things from someone else's perspective, and you can start to see that religious authority is less important, I think, at this stage. And you may also put excess confidence in rational, conscious mind, sometimes ignoring the spiritual dimension approach to life. Now, I know I've done that, because I know that often when I approach scriptures, it's too rational and it's too, it's too exegetal. But the point of this phase, I think, is that it grows out of the religious cage. And the person I find helpful here, I think, is Marcus Borg, and he says some dangerous things.
He's frightening.
He's frightening?
Yes, was frightening.
Listen to what he says here. In an interview, Borg said the following: "Sometimes words in the Bible are wrong." That's a dangerous thing for clergy to stand up and say in American churches. I would say Australian churches too.
Absolutely.
Yet that's one of the main messages of Marcus Borg's work. And he says, "I would love it if every clergy person would stand up and say to their congregations, sometimes the Bible is wrong." There is a taken for grantedness in conservative American Christian culture, and it's true, I think, of mainline Christianity, that understanding the Bible is simple. And if the Bible says something is wrong, then it's wrong, and that pretty much settles it. There are very few Christians who are willing to stand up and say, sometimes the Bible is wrong. Yet I think that's really important for Christians to say occasionally. So that's Marcus Borg. You find him scary?
Until fairly recently, I have certainly found Marcus Borg scary. And recently, I say probably the last 2 years. So, but before that, I certainly was coming to the conclusion that there are various. I think one of the best things I once saw was concentric circles, and in the center, the very center one, is the things which really make a difference, or which you really have to hold on to as belief. And then as you get out into the next circle, there are some things which are a little bit, you're not all that worried about, there's a little bit more doubt about it, and then out there are things which you certainly are not, really don't affect you. To me, that was an important picture, because if we hold everything, Genesis 1 being literal, 7 days, if we hold that in the same same one circle as, say, the historicity of Jesus, or then pull one of those cards out and the whole house of cards falls down. Whereas it's important to work out, it was important for me anyway, to work out what I held in that central circle, and even that shifts to some extent. I will shift some things out, and Marcus Borg has been useful to me in helping me to shift some things out of that really central thing. So there's very little now in that central thing, but in that central circle, but they're very precious and I hold them very close.
Okay. Can you mention maybe one thing that's in the inner circle?
It's my relationship with God. It's that friendship, it's that relationship, it's that ability to sit with God even though I don't understand God, I don't understand Creator Spirit, I can still sit and be there. And there's not a lot more there now than that, but it's very precious and it's very deep.
It sounds like the pearl of great price from the parable.
Probably, yes.
So now the interesting thing is that this is stage 4, and James Fowler calls it an individuative reflective faith. Stage 3, before that, is a conventional faith, and it's often the case that stage 3 people will accuse stage 4 people of having backslidden. Or we say when students go to university and all of this is challenged, that they've lost their faith, but they haven't lost their faith. Their faith has actually grown, and it's a deeper and more complex stage than previously. So that's stage 4. Stage 5 is what he calls a conjunctive faith, and the word conjunctive just means, I think, to bring things together. And he says that people don't get to this until their late 30s. They begin to see life as mystery and often return to sacred stories and symbols without being stuck in a theological box. Now, my favorite person who I think articulates the stage for me is Barbara Brown Taylor. She's a well-known American preacher, and she says the following. She says that she felt like she was spiritually sleeping around. She started collecting Tibetan singing bowls, Hindu deities, Muslim prayer rugs, and she felt like she was a spiritual shoplifter, but admits that she always came home to bed with Jesus at night. So she's
fairly risque.
She's criticized, but I like her. So what happens is she started to see the beauty in other religious traditions. Now, this is her speaking. She says, engaging the faith of others will almost certainly cause you to lose faith in the old box you kept God in.
Yes.
I will say the truths you glimpse in other religions are going to crowd up against some of your own. Holy envy may lead you to borrow some things, and you will need a place to put them. You may find spiritual guides outside your box whom you want to make room for, or some neighbors from other faiths who have stopped by for a visit. However, it happens. Your old box will turn out to be too small for who you have become. You will need a bigger one with more windows in it, something more like a home than a box. Perhaps where you can open the door to all kinds of people without fearing their faith and fearing that their faith will cancel yours out if you let them in. If things go well, they may invite you to visit them in their homes as well, so that your children can make friends.
Yes, very good.
So that's in her book, Holy Envy, and it's a conjunctive faith because she's not abandoning her own faith, but she's finding something deep and something beautiful in the faiths of others. What do you think of Holy Envy as a concept for stage 5 in a conjunctive faith?
No, good. I'm not sure just how relevant it is, but about 10 years ago, I had the privilege of sitting one night with the keeper of the fire on Woolai Beach, down a bit further south, Nick Kramer. And Nick is actually the great-great-grandson of, who was the Kramer who was burnt in Oxford?
Oh, Thomas Kramer.
Thomas Kramer. So
yes.
He's the great-grandson. And Nick has spent so many years studying under gurus in India and living in caves and eating grubs or something or other. And we had a wonderful night as we watched the stars come up, sitting around the fire, because, as I say, he's the official keeper of the fire on Woolai Beach. And we talked about the things we believed and the various stages and so on. I think we worked through about 7 stages, and we actually at that stage got to the end of the 6th and we were in complete agreement. The 7th we had a little bit of disagreement with, and that I'm still very much at that stage of the belief that as an individual I'm important. His concept was that he was like the salt doll that disappeared into the sea, and we couldn't come to terms on that one. Maybe I'm a little bit closer to understanding what he meant by that now.
So that's exactly the final point, because at stage 6, James Fowler's writing becomes very, what's the opposite of precise? Imprecise.
Imprecise or fuzzy,
yes,
might be a better word.
Yes, his writing is really fuzzy. And I think it's because maybe we're still on an evolutionary path and we have to grow into that. But he describes it as universalizing faith, and I suspect that people like Bede Griffiths, where I stayed in India, and Abhishitananda, the person who started the ashram I stayed at, Satchitananda, I suspect that they may be examples of this universalizing faith, and that we don't have much to say about it because, you know, humankind is still to get there. The exciting thing that James Fowler helps us to understand is really that faith is not an event, that it's an ongoing journey, and that doubt is embedded in that journey.
And I've really appreciated you using that song From the Other Side, the Leonard Cohen one, because it is just so amazing when you're struggling with doubt and when you're struggling and finding your way through, and you do actually get to the other side, how it enhances not so much just faith, but it enhances a real relationship with the one who's leading you through it. Yes.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, because I was actually going to include Leonard Cohen as an example of the stage 6 faith, but I held back because I thought maybe I'm going too far. But what I see in his poetry and what I see in his writing is something very, very deep and authentic. And he, in one of his interviews, you may remember in his story, he goes to become a Buddhist. He's an ordained Buddhist monk for 6 years of his life. And he comes out of there realizing he doesn't have a talent for being religious. I think he was too much in love with women and wine and smoking, I hazard to guess. But he says to the interviewer that the ashram, as his spiritual guide ran it, was a hospital. And the interviewer says, well, if it's a hospital, what was he trying to cure? And he says something so beautiful. He says he's trying to cure the illusion that you need a hospital at all.
I'll have to think about that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we might just wrap it up there. So the invitation I'm offering is for us to invite doubt in as part of our faith journey, that the more faith there is more doubt, and that doubt is the bridge to faith, so that if we're going to cut doubt out, then we are going to lose an opportunity for greater insight into our faith. And I'm hoping that as Christians we can have a more gentle and graceful approach with ourselves and not beat ourselves up and battle with all this guilt because we may have doubt. And I'm just admiring Jesus, that he seems to come to people not when they know the creed off by heart and their lives are sorted, but when they're walking away from Jerusalem, as in Luke 24, and they're walking away in confusion and doubt, and that's when Jesus rocks up.
Rocks up.
Yeah, so doubt is the breeding ground for faith. So if you want to join the conversation, we are at Zoom at about 6 o'clock, and the code for that is on the Osterville, the Anglicans.live website. So Anglicans.live at 6 o'clock. I look forward to seeing you there.